What happens when a member of the royal family thinks they can walk into the Loose Women's studio and lecture the panel about how they should do their jobs? In just 24 seconds, one shocking comment would destroy Prince Harry's reputation on daytime television forever and leave the entire nation watching in complete disbelief. The ITV studios in London were buzzing with excitement. Prince Harry had agreed to appear on Loose Women to discuss his charity work and mental health awareness. The producers were thrilled. A real prince on their show. This was going to be ratings gold. Denise Welch sat in her usual spot at the famous curved desk, shuffling through her notes one final time. She had been hosting television shows for years and had interviewed everyone from Hollywood stars to politicians. But today felt different. Today, she was about to sit across from actual royalty. "Right, ladies, places please," called the floor manager. "We go live in 30 seconds. Christine Lampard smoothed down her bright blue dress and checked her lipstick in the small mirror beside her chair. "I still can't believe he actually said yes to coming on," she whispered to Jane Moore, who was frantically scribbling last-minute questions on her cards. "Just remember, be respectful but not too soft," Jane whispered back. "The viewers want real questions, not royal worship." Nadia Sawalha adjusted her purple blazer and took a deep breath. She had covered royal stories before as a journalist, but never had she actually sat face-to-face with one of them. Her heart was pounding with nervous excitement. The familiar Loose Women theme music began to play, and the cameras rolled into action. Denise Welch looked directly into the main camera with her warm, professional smile. "Hello and welcome to Loose Women. I'm Denise Welch, and joining me today are Christine Lampard, Jane Moore, and Nadia Sawalha. Now, ladies, we have a very special guest with us today. He's a prince, a father, a husband, and a passionate advocate for mental health awareness. Please welcome Prince Harry." The studio audience erupted into applause as Prince Harry walked onto the set. He was wearing a smart navy blue suit with a crisp white shirt and a burgundy tie. He smiled and waved at the audience before taking his seat in the guest chair opposite the panel. "Your Royal Highness, thank you so much for joining us today," Denise said warmly. "How are you feeling about being here?" Prince Harry shifted slightly in his chair and cleared his throat. "Please, just call me Harry. And I'm here, aren't I? Though I have to say, I wasn't entirely sure what to expect from this show." There was something in his tone that made Christine Lampard raise an eyebrow. It wasn't quite rude, but it wasn't exactly gracious either. "Well, Harry, we're absolutely delighted to have you here," Christine said, leaning forward slightly. "We know you're passionate about mental health awareness. Can you tell us about the work you're doing in that area?" Prince Harry straightened up in his chair, and suddenly his whole demeanor changed. Gone was the polite, slightly awkward prince. In his place sat someone who looked like he was about to deliver a lecture. "Yes, mental health. It's something I care deeply about, obviously. But what I find interesting is how shows like this one handle these topics. I mean, do you ladies actually understand the responsibility you have?" Jane Moore blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry. The responsibility we have?" "Yes, exactly. You sit here day after day, discussing serious issues, giving advice to vulnerable people watching at home. Do you have the proper qualifications for that? The training? The expertise?" The studio fell completely silent. Even the audience stopped their gentle murmuring. Denise Welch's professional smile remained fixed on her face, but her eyes had gone steely. "Well, Harry," Denise said slowly, "we've all worked in television and media for many years. We're not therapists, but we do try to approach sensitive topics with care and often have experts join us." Prince Harry let out a small laugh that didn't sound amused at all. "With care? I've seen some of your shows. The way you discuss mental health, relationships, family problems, it's quite frankly irresponsible." Nadia Sawalha's mouth fell open. "I'm sorry, irresponsible?" "Yes, irresponsible. You're just four women sitting around a table, gossiping essentially, and people at home think you're giving them real advice. It's dangerous." The tension in the studio was now thick enough to cut with a knife. Christine Lampard glanced at Denise, who was gripping her pen so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Harry," Christine said carefully, "I think you might be misunderstanding what we do here. We share our experiences, we have conversations, we bring on experts when needed. We never claim to be medical professionals." Prince Harry shook his head dismissively. "That's exactly the problem. You don't claim to be experts, but you act like you are. People look up to television personalities. They trust you. And you're essentially giving out unqualified opinions on serious matters." Jane Moore had heard enough. "Now hang on a minute. We've been doing this show for over 20 years. We've helped countless people by simply being honest about our own struggles and experiences. That's not irresponsible. That's human. Human? Prince Harry scoffed. You call it human, I call it dangerous. Mental health isn't something you can just chat about over a cup of tea. It requires proper understanding, proper training, proper respect. Denise Welch had been in television long enough to know when a guest was crossing a line. And Prince Harry had not just crossed it, he had leaped over it with both feet. I think we need to clarify something here, Denise said, her voice remaining calm, but with an edge that regular viewers would recognize. You came on our show today, presumably because you wanted to discuss your own mental health work. Instead, you're sitting there criticizing us for doing exactly what we've always done, which is having honest, open conversations about real issues. Prince Harry turned to look directly at Denise. And I'm telling you that those conversations can be harmful when they're coming from unqualified sources. Unqualified sources? Nadia repeated, her voice rising slightly. We're 4 women who have lived through divorces, bereavements, mental health struggles, raising children, relationship problems. If that doesn't qualify us to talk about life experiences, then what does? Professional training, Prince Harry replied without hesitation. Degrees in psychology, therapy qualifications, medical expertise. Not just, being women who've had problems. The audience was now completely silent, sensing that something had gone very wrong with what was supposed to be a friendly chat show appearance. Christine Lampard took a deep breath. Harry, with respect, you're talking to us about mental health awareness, but you don't have professional qualifications in that area either. You're speaking from your own experiences, just like we do. Prince Harry's face flushed slightly. That's completely different. I have a platform, a responsibility that comes with my position. I've worked with actual experts, real professionals. And so have we, Jane Moore shot back. We've worked with therapists, doctors, psychiatrists, counselors. We bring them on the show regularly. But in between those expert guests, you're still giving your own opinions, your own advice, Prince Harry insisted. And people listen to you because you're on television, not because you actually know what you're talking about. Denise Welch set down her pen and folded her hands in front of her. 25 years in television had taught her to stay professional even when guests were being difficult. But this was testing even her legendary patience. Harry, I'm going to stop you right there, she said firmly. You've come onto our show and spent the last 10 minutes insulting what we do, questioning our right to have conversations about life, and essentially telling our audience that they shouldn't listen to us. I'm telling the truth, Prince Harry replied, his voice getting louder. Someone needs to call out this kind of irresponsible broadcasting. Irresponsible broadcasting? Nadia repeated, her voice now clearly angry. We've been nominated for awards for our mental health coverage. We've had people write in to thank us for potentially saving their lives by talking openly about suicide, depression, anxiety. Prince Harry shook his head again. And how many people might have been harmed by your amateur hour approach to serious issues? You don't know, do you? Because you don't have the training to recognize the damage you might be doing. That was it. Denise Welch had reached her limit. Right, I'm going to stop you there, Denise said, her voice cutting through the studio like a blade. You've just suggested that we might be harming people by talking about our own life experiences on a daytime television show. That is not only insulting to us, but it's insulting to every single person who has ever felt less alone because they heard someone else talk honestly about their struggles. Prince Harry leaned back in his chair, but his expression remained defiant. I'm simply saying that there should be standards, accountability. You can't just say whatever you want about mental health and hide behind the excuse that you're sharing experiences. Hide behind the excuse? Christine Lampard's voice was sharp now. Harry, I've talked openly on this show about my own anxiety, about losing my father, about the challenges of being a working mother. That's not hiding behind anything. That's being brave enough to be vulnerable in front of millions of people, but without proper context, without professional guidance. Those conversations can be misleading, Prince Harry insisted. People might think their problems are the same as yours when they're actually much more serious. Jane Moore had been gritting her teeth, but now she couldn't hold back any longer. So what you're saying is that ordinary people shouldn't talk about their mental health unless they have a degree, that we should all just suffer in silence until we can afford to see a qualified professional? That's not what I'm saying at all, Prince Harry replied, but his tone suggested he was getting frustrated that they weren't agreeing with him. Then what exactly are you saying? Nadia demanded. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're telling us that 4 women who have collectively been through divorce, bereavement, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and relationship trauma have no right to share their experiences because we don't have certificates on our walls. Prince Harry ran his hand through his hair. Look, I know you think you're helping, but mental health is complex. It's not something you can just chat about casually. There are real consequences when you get it wrong. Denise Welch's eyes flashed dangerously. Get it wrong? Harry, we've had mental health charities praise our coverage. We've had viewers write in to say that hearing us talk saved their lives. What exactly have we gotten wrong? You oversimplify things, Prince Harry said, his voice rising. You make it sound like everything can be solved with a good cry and a chat with friends. Real mental health treatment requires professional intervention. No one on this panel has ever said that. Christine shot back. We constantly tell people to seek professional help. We provide helpline numbers. We bring on qualified guests. But we also believe that breaking down stigma by talking openly is valuable too. Prince Harry shook his head vigorously. But that's just it. You're not qualified to know where the line is between helpful conversation and dangerous advice. The studio audience was now visibly uncomfortable. Several people were shifting in their seats, and the atmosphere had become incredibly tense. Nadia Sawalha leaned forward, her voice trembling with controlled anger. Harry, I suffered from severe postnatal depression after having my children. For months, I thought I was going insane. I felt completely alone and ashamed. When I finally talked about it on this show, hundreds of women contacted us to say they felt exactly the same way. Are you telling me that was dangerous? I'm saying that your experience might not be relevant to someone else's situation, Prince Harry replied coldly. And by sharing it without proper context, you might give someone the wrong impression about their own condition. The wrong impression? Nadia's voice was getting louder. The impression that they're not alone? The impression that it gets better? The impression that it's okay to ask for help? The impression that their situation is the same as yours when it might be much worse? Prince Harry snapped back. Jane Moore slammed her hand down on the desk, making everyone jump. That is the most patronizing thing I have ever heard. You're basically saying that ordinary people are too stupid to understand the difference between someone sharing their story and giving medical advice. I'm saying that people in vulnerable states don't always think clearly, Prince Harry replied, his tone becoming more condescending with every word. Christine Lampard stared at him in disbelief. And yet here you are, sharing your own mental health journey without any professional qualifications. How is that different from what we do? Prince Harry's face went red. Because I have a responsibility that comes with my position. People expect me to be informed, to work with the right people, to get proper advice before I speak publicly. Oh, so it's fine when you do it because you're a prince? Denise asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. It's different because I have access to the best experts, the most current research, the proper support systems, Prince Harry insisted. And we don't? Nadia asked incredulously. Harry, we work for one of the biggest television networks in the country. We have researchers, producers, we consult with experts constantly. Prince Harry waved his hand dismissively. It's not the same thing at all. The silence that followed was deafening. The four women stared at him in complete shock. Even the camera operators seemed stunned by what they had just witnessed. Denise Welch took a slow, deep breath. So what you're telling us, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that mental health conversations are only valid when they come from people with your level of privilege and access? That's not what I said, Prince Harry protested, but his voice lacked conviction. No, that's exactly what you said, Christine replied firmly. You just told us that your mental health advocacy is valid because you're a prince with access to experts. But ours is dangerous because we're just ordinary women sharing our experiences. Prince Harry shifted uncomfortably in his chair. You're twisting my words. We're repeating your words, Jane said coldly. The studio audience was now murmuring amongst themselves. Several people looked visibly upset by what they were witnessing. Nadia Sawalha shook her head slowly. You know what, Harry? I've interviewed politicians, celebrities, even other members of your family. I've never, ever had someone sit in that chair and tell me that my life experiences aren't valid enough to share because I don't have the right qualifications or the right connections. Prince Harry looked around the panel, perhaps finally realizing that he had crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Look, I didn't come here to attack anyone personally. But that's exactly what you've done, Denise said, her voice steady but ice cold. You've spent the last 15 minutes telling us that we're irresponsible, dangerous, and unqualified. You've suggested that our viewers are too stupid to think for themselves. And you've implied that mental health advocacy is only valid when it comes from people with royal connections. I'm trying to raise awareness about the importance of professional mental health care, Prince Harry said weakly. By attacking four women who have spent decades trying to break down mental health stigma? Christine asked. By suggesting that sharing personal experiences is somehow harmful? Prince Harry was now clearly flustered. That's not, I don't think you understand what I'm trying to say. Oh, we understand perfectly, Jane replied. You came on our show thinking you could lecture us about how to do our jobs. You thought you could waltz in here and tell us that our years of experience, our personal struggles, our connection with our audience, none of that matters because we're not qualified enough for your standards. The audience was now openly talking amongst themselves. The energy in the studio had shifted completely. What had started as excited anticipation for a royal visit had turned into something much darker. Denise Welch looked directly at Prince Harry, her expression unreadable. Harry, I think we need to address something here. You're sitting in front of four women who have been open about their mental health struggles, who have used their platforms to help others, who have worked tirelessly to reduce stigma and encourage people to seek help. And you're telling us we're doing it wrong. Prince Harry opened his mouth to speak, but Denise held up her hand. No, let me finish. Because what you've just demonstrated is exactly the kind of elitist attitude that keeps people from seeking help in the first place. The idea that mental health conversations are only valid when they come from the right kind of people, with the right qualifications, from the right backgrounds. Prince Harry's face was now bright red. That's not what I meant at all. Then what did you mean? Nadia asked pointedly. Prince Harry looked around the panel, clearly struggling to find words that would dig him out of the hole he had created for himself. Prince Harry stammered for a moment, his composure completely gone. I meant that, well, there should be some kind of oversight, some way to ensure that what gets said on television is actually helpful rather than potentially harmful. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The studio audience had gone completely silent again, but this time it wasn't expectant silence. It was the horrified silence of people watching something terrible unfold. Jane Moore slowly placed her pen down on the desk and stared at Prince Harry with undisguised disgust. Oversight? Are you seriously suggesting that there should be some kind of censorship board deciding what four women can say about their own life experiences? Prince Harry realized immediately that he had made yet another catastrophic mistake. No, that's not. I didn't mean censorship exactly. Then what did you mean exactly? Christine Lampard demanded. Because it sounds to me like you think someone should be monitoring what we say, making sure it meets with your approval before it reaches the public. Someone qualified, yes, Prince Harry said, apparently not understanding that he was making things infinitely worse. Someone with proper training who could review the content before it goes out. The gasp from the studio audience was audible. Several people actually stood up from their seats. Nadia Sawalha's mouth fell open in complete shock. Did you just suggest that our conversations should be reviewed by censors before they air? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Denise Welch had gone very still. Her years of experience in television had prepared her for difficult guests, for people who said inappropriate things, for interviews that went wrong. But nothing had prepared her for this level of arrogance and entitlement. Harry, she said, her voice dangerously quiet, are you aware that you've just suggested state censorship of women's voices on national television? Prince Harry's eyes widened as he finally began to understand the magnitude of what he had just said. No, I didn't mean state censorship. I meant professional oversight. Professional oversight of what we're allowed to say about our own lives? Christine asked incredulously. Professional oversight of our right to share our experiences with mental health, relationships, motherhood? That's not what I meant, Prince Harry said desperately, but sweat was now visible on his forehead. Then what did you mean? Jane demanded. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you think four women talking honestly about their lives is so dangerous that it needs to be monitored and controlled by people you deem qualified. Prince Harry looked around the panel desperately, clearly realizing that every word he said was making things worse, but unable to stop himself from continuing. I just think that when you have a platform like this, when you reach so many people, there should be some responsibility, some accountability. Accountability to who? Nadia asked sharply. To you? To some panel of experts you approve of? To men in suits who think they know better than we do about our own experiences? The studio was now in chaos. The audience was talking loudly amongst themselves. Several people were shaking their heads in disbelief. Others looked genuinely angry. Denise Welch stood up slowly from her chair. She had been in television for 25 years. She had interviewed murderers, politicians, celebrities having breakdowns, people in the middle of scandals. Never once had she walked away from an interview, but this was different. Harry, she said, still standing, looking down at him, In all my years of broadcasting, I have never had anyone sit in that chair and tell me that my voice and the voices of my colleagues should be subject to censorship because we're not qualified enough to talk about our own lives. Prince Harry was now visibly panicking. Denise, please, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Oh, there's been no misunderstanding, Denise replied coldly. You came onto our show, insulted our work, questioned our right to speak about our experiences, suggested our audience is too stupid to think for themselves, and then topped it all off by suggesting that what we say should be monitored by censors. I never said censors, Prince Harry protested weakly. Professional oversight, qualified reviewers, accountability measures, Christine listed off. Call it whatever you want, Harry. You're talking about controlling what women can say on television. Jane Moore was now shaking with anger. Do you have any idea how many women have struggled to find their voices? How many have been told throughout history that their experiences don't matter, that they should leave the important conversations to more qualified people? That's not what I'm saying, Prince Harry insisted, but his voice was barely audible now. That's exactly what you're saying, Nadia shot back. You're saying that our experiences with depression, anxiety, grief, divorce, motherhood, all of it, it's not valid enough to share without some kind of official approval. The floor manager was now gesturing frantically from the side of the studio, clearly unsure whether to cut to a commercial break or let this unprecedented disaster continue to unfold live on television. Denise Welch looked directly into the main camera. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to apologize to you, our viewers. You tuned in today expecting to see a respectful conversation about mental health awareness? Instead, you've witnessed someone suggest that women's voices should be subject to censorship and oversight. Prince Harry jumped to his feet. That is not what I said. Sit down, Denise commanded, her voice cutting through the studio like a whip. You've said quite enough. But Prince Harry was now in full panic mode. You're completely misrepresenting everything I've said. I came here to have a reasonable discussion about responsible broadcasting, and you've turned it into some kind of attack on free speech. Responsible broadcasting? Christine repeated, standing up as well. Harry, you've spent the last 20 minutes telling us that we're unqualified, irresponsible, and dangerous. You've suggested that our personal experiences should be censored. How is any of that responsible? Prince Harry looked around desperately at the audience, perhaps hoping for some support. Instead, he found faces filled with disgust, anger, and disappointment. I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding here, he said, his voice cracking slightly. The only misunderstanding, Jane said, now also standing, is that you fundamentally misunderstood what kind of show this is and what kind of women we are. You thought you could come in here and lecture us like we're school children who don't know our place. Nadia was the last to stand, and when she did, her voice was shaking with emotion. You know what, Harry? My daughter watches this show. She's seen me talk about my struggles with body image, with confidence, with being a working mother. And because of those conversations, she feels comfortable talking to me about her own worries and fears. Are you telling me that's dangerous? Are you telling me that needs to be censored? Prince Harry opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked around at the four women standing over him, at the hostile audience, at the camera still rolling, capturing every moment of his complete humiliation. Denise Welch walked around the desk and stood directly in front of Prince Harry's chair. I think it's time for you to leave. The studio fell completely silent. The audience held their breath. The camera operators kept rolling, knowing they were capturing television history. I'm sorry, Prince Harry stammered. You heard me, Denise said calmly. I think it's time for you to leave our show. Prince Harry looked around desperately. But we still have 10 minutes left of the interview. No, Denise replied firmly. We don't, because this stopped being an interview the moment you decided to attack us, our work, and our right to speak freely about our own lives. Christine Lampard nodded in agreement. Harry, you've made it very clear that you don't respect what we do here, that you think we're dangerous and irresponsible. So why would you want to stay? Because I think we can still have a productive conversation, Prince Harry said desperately. Jane Moore laughed, but there was no humor in it. A productive conversation? Harry, you've just suggested that women's voices should be subject to censorship. What exactly do you think we could productively discuss after that? Prince Harry stood up slowly, clearly realizing that his situation was hopeless. I think you've all seriously misunderstood my intentions here. No, Harry, Nadia said quietly. We understood your intentions perfectly. You came here thinking you could put 4 women in their place. You thought you could lecture us about how to do jobs we've been doing successfully for decades. You thought your title and your connections made you more qualified to talk about mental health than women who have actually lived through it. The studio audience began to applaud. slowly at first, then building to thunderous approval. They were applauding the four women who had stood up to arrogance and entitlement. They were applauding the defense of free speech and women's voices. Prince Harry stood there for a moment, listening to the applause that was clearly not for him, his face red with humiliation and anger. "Fine," he said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "If this is how you want to handle a reasonable discussion about broadcast responsibility, then I'll leave." "Goodbye, Harry," Denise said simply. As Prince Harry walked off the set, his footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet studio, Denise Welch turned back to the camera. "Well, ladies and gentlemen," she said, her professional composure returning, "I think that was quite educational. We've just demonstrated exactly why women's voices matter, why our experiences are valid, and why we should never let anyone, regardless of their title or position, tell us that we're not qualified to speak our truth." The audience erupted in applause once more. Christine, Jane, and Nadia returned to their seats, all of them still visibly shaken but also clearly proud of how they had handled an impossible situation. "When we come back after the break," Denise continued, "we'll be discussing the importance of standing up for yourself and not letting anyone silence your voice, no matter who they are or what they think they're entitled to." The camera stopped rolling, and for a moment, the studio was completely silent. Then, slowly, the four women looked at each other and began to smile. They had just stood up to a prince, defended their right to speak freely, and refused to be intimidated by someone who thought his position made him superior to them. In 24 seconds, Prince Harry had destroyed his reputation on daytime television forever. And in doing so, he had given four remarkable women the chance to show the world exactly what they were made of.